Welcome. I'm John Rodwick, and I'm an AARP Colorado volunteer. This is a very special program that deals with including pets in emergency planning and how your efforts can protect them when the unexpected happens. As you and I know, pets bring immense joy to our lives, so it's important to remember them as we prepare our emergency and end-of-life plans. Today, we have Anna Stout, CEO of the Roice-Hurst Humane Society in Grand Junction, Colorado. And she will tell us how to keep our pets well cared for in times of crisis and ensure their future caregivers have all the information and tools they need. Topics to be covered today include how to create an emergency kit for your pet and simple sample directives to include in your will. If you have any questions, we ask you to write them in chat, and Anna will answer those questions at the end of her presentation. So please welcome Anna Stout, the Roice-Hurst Humane Society CEO, as she explains all we need to know about planning for our pets. Thank you. Anna?
Thank you, John, and thank you, everyone. I want to make an additional introduction, just in case. This is a foster kitten that I have with me today, and she's a rehab foster kitten, so we're working in injury. We're giving her some physical therapy, but I just wanted to give that caveat in case you hear a kitten crying or in case anything comes crashing down during the webinar. It is probably her fault. But right now she's well behaved and sleeping in my lap. So thank you so much, everybody, for joining. This is a topic I feel very passionately about. I'm a planner by nature, and it's one of my favorite things to do, but I also, in my role at Roice-Hurst, have seen many, many pets that have come in because there wasn't a plan in place, and it's a lot more complicated. It's a lot more emotionally taxing for folks when they don't have that plan in place. And it's actually really quite easy to get prepared for the unexpected, the unplanned, by making a plan now. And we're going to talk about a bunch of ways that you can give yourself a lot of peace of mind as it relates to your pets. One thing that we hear often at the shelter is people saying, oh, I can't adopt. I don't know what's going on with my lifestyle. We've already had a webinar on fostering, but I want to make sure that people feel really comfortable adopting, even if you're not sure. I mean, none of us are sure how many more days or weeks or years we have left. But I don't ever want anyone to worry about their pets outliving them being a reason not to adopt, because with a good plan in place, you can be that pet's savior and rescuer, even if your pet is going to outlive you. So this is what we're going to prepare today, and just share a couple of strategies for making sure that you feel good about it and your pets are well protected. So I'll start sharing my screen now, and I'm going to present this here. As John mentioned, I'm the CEO of the Roice-Hurst Humane Society. And the Roice-Hurst Humane Society is over here on the Western Slope. We are located in Grand Junction, Colorado, our main shelter here, but we also have a satellite facility that we operate in Delta, Colorado. We were founded almost 60 years ago. Next year is our 60th anniversary. And last year we served over 840 lost or homeless pets, and that only includes the ones that came through our shelter or our foster homes, and not the pets that we served in our other programs, such as our short-term boarding program or our pet pantry or our low-cost vaccination clinics. So just pets that needed homes, needed temporary care from us, over 840, and we're tracking this year to far exceed that. So we're so much more than a shelter. We really, really prioritize things like our conversation today, because we believe that when we support pet owners, we support pets. And often it results in fewer pets coming into the shelter or pets having shorter stays in the shelter. So as we talk about when we're planning for our pets, as I mentioned before, this is when we're planning for anything. This is not just planning for death. This is planning for natural disasters, man-made disasters, personal crises, anything that is a disruption to our regular life. That's what we're working to plan for. So I want to talk today about how we plan medically for our pets so that if something were to happen and it were to be sudden, we know that we have our vaccines and our microchipping and our identification all up to speed. Also, how to have an emergency pet kit, whether that's one that you take or whether it's one that you pass off to somebody if the emergency is happening to you. Making a plan for where you're safe to go and what resources you need if you have to, for example, evacuate. And then also the kind of difficult conversation that a lot of us don't want to have, but what happens at the end of our lives? How do we make sure that if our life ends before our pets, that we have everything in order for that pet? And so that's going to be end of life planning in general and some sample language for your will. And this webinar will be available if you want to go back. And we also have resources on our website where you can actually get this language, and I'll show you that link at the end. So let's start with just making sure that our pet is identifiable and medically up to date, UTD, as we say at the shelter. So part of this is making sure that your ID tag is on your pet, dog or cat. If you have a pet that just won't wear one, or if you have a cat that spends some time outdoors and tends to get, that collar stuck in fences or trees or whatever, and it tears away, it's great to have that microchip as an additional resource because the pet ID tag is great. Anybody can find it and see it, call and identify you. But the microchip is something that any animal organization or pet rescue or vet clinic has a microchip reader, and that information sort of sits there in perpetuity. It's just your contact information to allow somebody to get a hold of you if they were to find your pet. So we've had many instances of accidents, car accidents, where a pet's been in the car. Those have actually made the news, especially the ones on the interstate where an animal gets away. So having that identification is part of planning for your pets. If you don't have an ID tag or don't want an ID tag and really just want to go with that sort of ever-placed internal option, we do microchip clinics at the shelter and can do that, but also any of your local vet clinics can handle microchip placement. Next, making sure your pet is up to date on vaccinations. This is important for the obvious reason, for your pet's health, but where it becomes where it becomes part of our planning is that if you needed to put your pet in a boarding facility at the last minute, if this were something that, again, it was a crisis or an emergency and you need to get your pet into boarding temporarily to allow you to handle the crisis, those boarding facilities require vaccines. And a lot of them require vaccines at least a certain amount of time in advance. So getting vaccines today wouldn't necessarily mean you can get your pet into a boarding facility today or tomorrow. So having that up to date and just having that on your calendar as something that you do for part of your pet's planning is a really important way to make sure that you're prepared to move your pet into a boarding facility without any barriers. So as I mentioned before, we offer low-cost vaccination and microchip clinics. You can get both done at once. You can visit our website to see our upcoming clinics and get registered for that. It's something that you do have to register in advance because our spaces fill up really quickly and are very limited. But if you're not here on the Western Slope, or if you have a relationship already with a vet clinic that you trust, then I would absolutely recommend reaching out to your vet clinic to see about getting those vaccinations up to date. You can also go in. Sometimes we have microchips and we leave them forever, and we've moved a couple of times. So you can actually go in and have somebody scan that microchip and double check that the information that is in there is the appropriate information, that it's not an old contact number or a previous owner, which we see happen, unfortunately, quite frequently. So going in and having that scanned and just seeing what information comes up is helpful. And then usually, whether it's an animal shelter or she woke up, whether it's an animal shelter or it's a vet clinic, they can usually walk you through how to change that information if you've forgotten your login information for the microchip company. Also, our crisis boarding program, I just want to mention, in case you're ever in a situation or you know of somebody who's in a situation where they're having a short-term emergency. So this is not something like chronic homelessness. This is something where you've just lost your home or been notified that you're being evicted or that the lease is ending, or something comes up and you need inpatient hospital care or treatment, we provide up to 30 days of boarding for free so that somebody knows as they're going into this crisis, they will have their pet on the other side of it. They will be able to be reunited, and that the short-term crisis doesn't turn into a permanent loss of that pet. So that's just something I want everyone to be aware of that we have, but again, making sure those vaccinations are up to date so that they can move into an emergency boarding program, whether that's through us or anybody else, is really critical. And the next piece I want to talk about is preparing a pet emergency kit. I actually have a couple of these at my house because I have, probably no surprise, many animals. And so I make sure that I have these available. They're in an easy to locate place. They're in my front closet up on the top shelf where I can grab those in an instant if I need something. So it can be either a tote bag, or if your animal is small enough to go in a carrier, it's nice to have that carrier if you were in a situation where you had to go into somebody else's home where the animal couldn't be, just kind of free roaming, or if you have to go into an emergency sheltering situation, having a kennel or a crate is really important. But if you have a pet that, let's say, is a Great Dane, and that's not something that makes sense to have as a part of your emergency kit, make sure you have that leash, some way to secure the animal. So, but I like to use my carriers, and I take my pet carriers and I put for each animal, whatever a bowl for each animal, some cans of wet cat food, and I apologize, she's got an opinion about this, extra cat food for her. So cans of cat food, a small bag of dry food that would get me through a couple of days, bottled water, just in case whatever the emergency is impacting access to clean water, a small first aid kit that would just include the basics that I might need for pet first aid, some kind of proof of ownership. And that can be, an adoption document, that can be a signed agreement from somebody who gave it to you, or it can just be, some pictures back to when you first got the animal. Those all serve for proof of ownership if you ever had that in question. And then importantly, most recent vet records. You don't necessarily have to have the entire, 10 years of life of vet records, just the critical things that somebody might need if they needed to care for your pet, or if you needed to get medication refilled and weren't able to get in touch with your vet. So all of those things are really important to have in there. So using that carrier and just kind of filling it with whatever you might need is a really good way to feel prepared. I leave my food in there for, it's sealed food. So I leave it in there for the time that it takes, typically about a year before it would be expiring. And then I just rotate it out and use that as the food that I'm serving my pets right now, and just, replenish that with new food. I do all of this personally in January. January is my favorite month of the year because I love the concept of preparation and new beginnings and starting with a really blank slate. So I have a number of things on my just personal checklist that I do in January. And one of them is double check. I get all of my pets, their checkups in January. I check on the food and make sure that the kit's all prepared, and then a series of other things that are just personal to me. But having that, having a habit around that or a routine around that can really serve to make it easy and automatic for you to keep these things prepared. Also know where you go. What is your safe place, or what are your safe places in case of an emergency, whether that is, a pipe bursting in your house that you have to get out, whether it's a fire or a natural disaster, whatever it is, know where you're going to go. So talk to friends in advance. If you have family or neighbors that you could turn to, make sure that they're prepared, not just to receive you, but that they understand that you would be bringing your pet or your pets with you. If you don't have anywhere that you can think of right off the bat that you would be able to turn, or if you don't know of, if it's something that you think might be impacting others, think about the other places that you could potentially go. So know which hotels or motels in town allow pets. Know what your local homeless shelters offer. You can see down below here, one of the resources that we provide here in Grand Junction is at Homeward Bound of the Grand Valley, our local homeless shelter. We have installed 9 of these little, they're called pallet shelters, so that people who are experiencing homelessness and who have pets have private places to shelter, private and dignified places to shelter alongside their pets. So know what resources are in your community. and ensure that they're pet friendly. That is the key here. Is a lot of the time we think, oh, I'll just go to my mom's house, or I'll just go to my daughter's house. And if there are other pets in the home that don't get along with your pets, or if there's somebody who is, deathly allergic to pets in their home, that may not be the option. So making sure that you have those conversations with your friends and loved ones about where you could go and whether or not your pets could come with you. And if your pets can't come with you, that's again where we come back to options like short-term boarding or pet-friendly hotels. We also offer in terms of resources in these crisis and emergency situations, we have a pet pantry at both locations. We have one in Grand Junction, one in Delta. And we also can deliver pet supplies, pet food to people who are not mobile. And that's just something that, it can be a really good stopgap and fill a hole while you're getting back on your feet or getting through that crisis. So know that those are options. I'm going to show a video really quickly, and then I'm going to tell this story. I'm not going to show the whole video because it's quite long, but this is Mau Mau. And I'll tell Mau Mau's story in a moment, but just look at this sweet cat. Come here. Come here. Come here. So Mau Mau's story, this goes on, and he's really adorable and keeps talking. Mau Mau's story is really, I think, the illustration of why this is so important to think about what happens if something happens to us. Mau Mau was actually my neighbor's cat, and my neighbor passed away inside her home. She didn't have any family in town, and it was neighbors who actually noticed the mail was piling up and that she hadn't been out and did a welfare check, and she had passed away peacefully in her home. Unfortunately, nobody knew. Her daughter didn't live in town, and nobody in her circle knew what pets she had or what her plan was for them, what their names or their histories were. And what ended up happening was her daughter had somebody come and essentially close up the house, and it wasn't winterized. So the swamp cooler was still in the window, and there was a gap in the window. And so there were cats coming in and out, and nobody quite knew what they were. And the animal control came and caught the cats that they could, removed the dog that was in there. But Mau Mau somehow got overlooked. And when they closed up the house and winterized it, Mau Mau was stuck outside, and none of the neighbors realized that this cat was Nancy's cat. And so she passed in the summertime, and this video was taken in the spring. So Mau Mau spent about 9 months of his life. He was probably 13 or 14 years old. He was a very senior cat. He spent this time outside. And it wasn't until one day that I was talking to a neighbor on the other side, and she mentioned something about that black cat in the alley. And I said, I assumed it was your cat. And she said, no, it's not my cat. I thought it was your cat. And then all of the neighbors kind of chatted, and we eventually figured out that Mau Mau had been one of Nancy's cats that had not been recovered by animal control, by animal services, and had lived out in the winter and survived on whatever he could find. So it was a really tragic story. When he finally got friendly enough to come to me, that's when I took this video and got him to trust me over the span of days to weeks it took to get him to just sort of, know that he could come to me. We brought him to the shelter. He was in rough shape health-wise, but we were able to rehab him and treat him and get him into a home. And he did spend his final years in a very warm, loving home. But Mau Mau should not have had to have spent those 9 months outside had there been a plan in place for him. And this is not in any way, a dig on Nancy. I think Nancy, of course, didn't expect to be passing when she did, and she loved these pets very much, but hadn't ever had the conversation about what to do with them. Now, had there been some kind of paperwork in place or something even on the fridge that said, this is my list of pets, this is my plan for them, then at least Animal Services or her daughter and son-in-law would have known how many to account for and what to do about them, and could have gotten them to a shelter or rehomed. So that's Mau Mau to me is this really special cat that really emphasizes or underscores the importance of thinking about what happens if the unexpected happens. So we do have some resources for this. This is something that you don't have to reinvent the wheel for. Making sure that that the transition for your pet from your home to somebody else's home, or your home to the animal shelter to somebody else's home, is as smooth as possible and non-disruptive to the pets. So we do have downloadable forms, and I'm going to show you a sample of what those look like here in a second, where it'll help you think through things that you may not have thought that you need to think through to tell somebody else. Information that's really helpful for a new caregiver to know about your pet, such as its preferences. What does it eat? What has it had from a veterinary treatment or diagnosis standpoint? What's your animal's routine? What does the daily schedule look like? All of that information that sometimes we just assume that that's what our pet does and that's what other pets do. But for a future caregiver, it's really helpful to know this information, and it really helps shelters be able to match your pet to a really good next home, and make sure that that lifestyle matches based on all the information you provide. And that way the odds of the animal having to bounce between homes trying to find that right home are much lower. So I'll show you exactly where you can go on our website to find that form, but you can download one for cats or one for dogs, and you just print out the number of pets that you have, that many copies, and do each of those. What we recommend is that you are deliberate about choosing that future caregiver for your pet, and that you have a conversation with that person and make sure that that's something that's going to work, and then have that conversation annually. So whether it's a friend, a family member, or even the animal shelter, make sure you let them know in advance, hey, this is my plan if something were to happen to me, and then you check back in. So I had somebody designated a couple years ago who was absolutely in love with 2 of my cats, and also one of my dogs. And then she got married, and the blended home had more animals that came into the picture, making her no longer an option for at least not all of the pets that she was planning on taking. So as somebody else's life situation or even pet situation changes, that may alter their plans when it relates to their ability to take your pet. So having that conversation on a regular basis, hey, just wanted to make sure I'm just doing my, my January resolutions list, and one of my resolutions is to just check on all of my pet preparation. Are you still good to take Fifi? And if they're good, that's great. If not, then have further conversations with others. With that pet information for future caregivers form, provide that information to them. You can give that to them now, but then also keep a copy where any of your end-of-life documents are, whether that's on your fridge, or whether that's in your will, whether that's filed with somebody in your circle, whether that's the administrator of your estate. It doesn't matter where you have it. Just make sure that it's somewhere that it can immediately be implemented. It can immediately be passed along to somebody who's caring for those pets. Same thing with the animal shelter. The animal shelter will want that information. We keep that on file so that if your animal were to end up in the shelter, we know exactly what we have. But of course, updating that on an annual basis is really important, because a lot changes, especially from a health standpoint with our pets as they get older. So discuss that plan and provide a copy, but keep a copy somewhere where it makes sense to keep with your end of year plans. This is it's kind of a blurry image, but this is what you would download on our website. This is just a snippet of our different, of the 2 future caregivers. If you have a bird, or if you have a lizard, if you have something else that you're planning for as well, you can alter this. You can make your own. This really is just meant to be a guide. And this is a couple pages long. It takes a little bit of time. Frankly, I actually find it kind of enjoyable to do. It's kind of fun to think of, to write all the information about your pet's personality and your pet's preferences and stuff. But it's a good way to make sure that you remove the mystery for somebody else. And again, that adjustment time is shorter, both for the new caregiver and for the pet. So while we're talking about end of year documents, let's also talk about our will. Unless you're working with an estate planner or a lawyer who has pets in mind, this often gets overlooked when you're talking about things like your children or grandchildren or your assets, your debts. All of those things typically are on the radar, but pets are not always on the radar. So making sure you have that conversation with your attorney or your estate planner and saying, hey, I want to specifically make sure that my pet is included in my will and my wishes are known for my pet. You also, depending on what your financial situation is, can allocate funds to leave with a new pet caregiver. Sometimes that's the thing that that makes us feel weird about asking people to take on our pets, is that we know we're asking them to take on an expense. So if that is something that that would kind of give you more peace of mind, you can do that. Or if it's somebody who would be a great caregiver, but maybe doesn't have the funds, or you have an animal that has some special needs, that's a really good way to ensure that the right person can still care for the pet and have some assistance to do that. And there are a couple different ways that you can do that. So I'm going to go through a couple of different scenarios here of what this could look like, starting with just kind of the broad, this is where I want my pet to go, all the way down to the more complex situations that you're likely going to want to engage an attorney to set up. So the first sample directive is really just, it's about guardianship. So I hereby give and bequeath my pet, named whatever, to my friend Elvis Presley to provide continued care and shelter for my pet. And so that just makes it very clear, especially if there might be any infighting, there might be children who both want a pet. This makes it really clear that this is my wish and this is where I want my pet to go. Of course, again, make sure that Elvis Presley is willing and prepared to accept that when the will is executed. This is what I mentioned before about giving a financial gift. So this could be a set amount. I hereby give and bequeath my cat, Pepe Le Pew, who is a pet that we did have in the shelter, to my friend Taylor Swift to provide continued care and shelter for Pepe Le Pew. I also give and bequeath the sum of however much money you wanted to leave to Taylor Swift to fund the costs and expenses to care for and maintain Pepe. So that would be a way that you could give just a determinate sum. Then there is also the option to leave the pet to a shelter. Sometimes having this in the will, it may seem like this is going to be the default. So why would I include this? Well, for some family members, this is a really difficult decision to make because it feels bad. It feels bad to take a loved one's pet and take it to the shelter, because sometimes there's some guilt with that I should do something about this, or a loved one should have this pet. But if it is your wish and if it's something that you're comfortable with, giving that directive is a gift to the people who are then executing your will, because then they don't have to question or carry any of that personal responsibility guilt for, I should take on Yam, but I'm not in a position. So I give and bequeath my cat Yam to the Roice-Hurst Humane Society to provide care and shelter for him pending the Humane Society being able to place him in an appropriate new and safe home. That's an appropriate directive to add in there. Some people also will add an additional bit in there that specifically directs the Humane Society to move the cat into a foster home as opposed to the shelter, and have a conversation with whatever facility you're talking to make sure that that's something that they can accommodate. But that is a condition that we have accepted and we have met for pets that have been left bequeathed to us in the will. There is also an opportunity to leave a legacy gift. And of course, this is a way that, and whether or not you leave your pet in the care of the Humane Society or any other nonprofit, you can still give and bequeath a sum of money to a nonprofit to be a legacy gift. So that legacy gift is something that generally it's a larger gift that leaves your legacy beyond your time here. And so it's something that in our case, we have a financial policy that we generally roll those legacy gifts into our endowment so that they really do become a perpetual fund that provides care for pets in perpetuity. But this is something that you can do for any nonprofit, but it's especially meaningful if what you're doing right now is planning for your pets to leave a gift in your pet's honor or in your own legacy to a nonprofit Humane Society. You can also, the kitten is climbing my leg, so we're going to pull her back up here and let her have her cameo that she's asking for. So you can also leave your pet in the care of a shelter or rescue and leave a financial gift as well. That generally is not something that you leave that sum for the specific care of your pet, but rather for use in ongoing operations and programs. And that's because there's no way of knowing specifically how much your pet is going to cost, how long it's going to be there, what care they might need. And then, that essentially provides the care to the shelter, so the shelter is able to care for many pets like yours into the future. And then finally, pet trusts. You can create a pet trust, which allows you to leave money to provide for the care for your pet, whatever that is, whether that's providing food and just general care, whether that's medical care. And this is something you'll want to set up with a professional. And so you can either do it in your will if you're working on that. If you've already done your will, you can also just create a trust via a separate document. And what this does in very sort of broad terms is you leave a certain sum, let's say it's $10,000, and that sum is designated for the purposes of caring for your pet and maintaining its current level of quality of life. And if this is a breeding animal, then that might be something that cares for their offspring as well. And that lasts for the pet's life up to 21 years. And so then what's left over in the trust, you establish where that goes. Roice-Hurst, for example, has been the trustee in some of these relationships where once the pet's care has been completed, when the pet passes away, then that becomes a donation to the Humane Society. It can be given to the individual who you've chosen to look after your pet. So let's say it's a child or a friend, and you leave that sum. And then once the pet passes away, then that money would then just become available to them as funds that they would receive. So this is a really important structure to discuss with an attorney or with an expert in this kind of trust arrangement, to make sure that the trustee and the person, who is making the decisions about what reasonable or necessary care is for the pet. And then also, does the person who is receiving that understand any tax implications or any other requirements that come along with that? So it's a little bit more, it's a little bit more complicated than simply leaving and designating a beneficiary in your will, but it can provide that sort of ongoing support for your pet if that's something that is important to you or that is concerning to you. So finally, I want to make sure you have access to our resources. And this is something that the downloads on our website are free. Anybody can use them. You can pass them along to friends in any other part of the country or the world. It doesn't, there's nothing proprietary about that in that sense. We want to make sure that people feel that they are prepared, that they know that when they are gone, when they're incapacitated or unable to care for that pet, that their pet is going to have really uninterrupted, compassionate care. So if you go to our website at rhumanesociety.org/planning for your pets with hyphens in between, that's where you can download those forms for future caregivers, and also sample directives, which you can then take and either incorporate it into your will if you've done your will on your own, or take it to your attorney or your estate planner to help incorporate that language as well, and discuss any of the questions you still have about the legal implications of any of that. And then also you can always contact us. We're happy to sit down and help you go through those planning for your pets forms. We can do that over the phone. We can do that virtually. We can do that in person, and really just help think through what that plan is. So we're happy to answer any questions about any of that. And we want to be a resource for you and a partner in giving you peace of mind and knowing that you can have your pets and know that whatever happens to you, your pets are planned for. So the only other thing I wanted to show really quickly is if you're interested in getting our newsletter, where we have an upcoming in the spring, we're doing a workshop with an attorney here in town who will help think through some of these things and answer some of those questions from a legal perspective, and who also offers some discounts to people who come to them referred through the Humane Society to work on or update their will. So if you're interested in being on our newsletter to know when those things are coming up and to get information about planning for your pets and about events and everything else that we do, right here on our website, this is our just our regular front landing page. Down here at the bottom, you can see how you can subscribe to our e-newsletter. So I wanted to share that as well, because it's an ongoing resource, and we provide a lot of information throughout the year about things like emergency kits and what to do at different points in the year to plan for your pets. So that is what I've got. I see that there are a number of questions in the chat, so I will open up the questions time. If you have any questions, please feel free to drop that question right here in the chat, and I'll do my best to address them. So the first one I see is from Rochelle. I just lost my 15-year-old fur baby, and I'm thinking about just fostering until I'm ready to adopt. Since I'm in my 60s, I plan to adopt a 4-year-old dog or older. Is it hard to become a foster parent for dogs with short-term fostering needs? Absolutely not. It is not difficult at all. In fact, every one of our animals that is available for adoption is also available for foster. And we do have, and so a lot of those are short-term fostering needs simply because the animal is very adoptable and will be adopted relatively quickly. Some of them are perhaps going through some medical diagnosis and might need to, to be in a foster home and receive medication or just be observed or just have limited activity for a short period of time while we're working on a treatment plan, for example. So there are lots of options for short-term fostering needs for pets. And we talked about this in the last webinar, which you can still go back and access. There, I think we don't like to talk about test driving pets, but there is some beauty in knowing whether or not, serving a need for the pet and serving a really important role in a pet's life that may not become your pet forever, but may also. So there's sometimes it's kind of nice to have that ability to try it out, see if you're ready, see if your lifestyle is ready, see if that pet is the right fit for the home. And you don't have that kind of associated guilt with taking it back to the shelter if that was always the plan to then get it adopted. So lots and lots of opportunities for fostering. And I will put a link to our website where you can actually apply to be a foster and get more information about that. Let's see, I'm going to see if there are any other questions. Some of these are just comments. So where or how should I keep my vaccination history for my 2 cats? Is it available via the microchip? And this is Maria's question. Generally, it is not. It depends on your microchip company. Sometimes you can add or upload additional information. It just really depends on which microchip you have. Where I think it would make a lot of sense to keep it is with that Planning for Your Pets page, because that packet, you can attach that to the back, but there's also a line in there that asks about medical history. So if you're updating that Planning for Your Pets form every year, or the Future Caregivers form every year, that would be in there. Now, the other thing that's, I think, good to know, it is also just a little bit of peace of mind, is if you are, if you leave information about who your vet is, animals don't have HIPAA. So there is no protected health information for pets. So you can call down to a vet clinic and get information about a pet, even if you don't have all of the details. So as long as you have, I would include that vaccination history as part of your future caregiver packet. I would also include your latest vaccination history in your emergency kit. So I'd keep it in 2 places and then just update that every year. But know that as long as you have that information about who your vet was that did the vaccinations, somebody could call and get a copy of that information. Karen asked, would vet records or animal license receipt serve as proof of ownership? Yes. Now we see some weird situations sometimes where people jointly sort of own a pet, and maybe it's, maybe it's my pet, but my partner has been the one paying the bill, or it's my partner's name on the bill at the vet clinic. Be really careful about that. Make sure you can establish who the pet actually belongs to. This is strange to say, but if you are going through a divorce, make sure that that's spelled out in your divorce paperwork, who keeps the pets and who has ownership of the pets. But generally speaking, absent any really complicated situations like that, if you have vet records that show your name, your pet's name, and that you can go back to however long you've had the pet, that establishes proof of ownership for the most part. That you could call down to Mason County Animal Services or your local animal control agency and just ask if there is anything. If you're worried that you might have a complicated situation, you can call down and ask if X document would be sufficient as proof of ownership. Generally speaking, though, yes, animal licensing or vet records would serve that purpose. Lisa had a great tip, which is to label all of the crates and carriers with your animals' names and telephone numbers and veterinary information. Absolutely. There are also tags that you can put on the outside of like on the door to crates and stuff that have that information, just like a luggage tag, Karen asked, do you have to name the pets or can you keep it general so that the paperwork will apply to any pets that you have when you pass? So the caregiver, your will can be vague, and I would double check that with an attorney because I'm not an attorney, but if you just say my pets shall, I give and bequeath my pets to, then that should be obvious enough. But the planning for your pets information really is meant to be specific to the animal, because we want to know about that animal's specific needs and routine and everything else. So I would make sure, at the very least, even if you're vague in how you bequeath those pets, especially if they're going to an animal shelter, then that's completely fine to leave that vague in your will language. But if it's going to a person, I think it would be nice to establish what pet that is, especially if you have more than one, and make sure that that caregiver can take each of the pets. Sometimes, I know in my case, I have more than a couple. And so it wouldn't make sense for all of my animals to go to one household. I think that would be really unlikely in my situation. So I have different places, different people willing to take, this cat and this dog, and then somebody else is taking these two cats, so I would make it more specific if you are planning to leave it to an individual. And if you keep it vague in the will, make sure that your caregiver forms are specific and updated each time, every year. Lynn asked, do you have the window or door stickers that highlight to the fire department what types of animals and how many in case of rescue in a fire or other emergency situation? Those, I think our firehouse may have. We do not give those out at the shelter, but those are also something that you can put on you can just magnet onto your fridge. So that's, I'm not sure firefighters are going in and looking at the fridge, but for other kinds of emergencies, that is often where people will find that information. One of the questions was, where on our website are the forms? Let me pull that up and I will show you that. So let me share my screen. If you go to our website here, this is our planning for your pets page, and we have those links right here for the different, here's the sample directives, the sample language for your wills. This is the form for future caregivers for your dogs, and this is for your cats. So on this page, you just come here, scroll down, and you can download them here as PDFs. And let's see. Scan your pet's information. So then Derek's question was, will this presentation be available for us to review? Yes, this will be available for review and for sharing. If there's somebody else that needs this information, you can absolutely share this afterwards, and AARP will make sure that you have access to this. So you can be in touch with Allison for any information about that. And as I said before, there's also a presentation on fostering if you're interested in seeing that, because it is, there are those two, the hesitation we have to commit long-term to an animal, whether it's because we're not sure what our longevity is going to look like, or because we're in that time of life that we want some flexibility and to be able to travel and to be able to, take time away or have guests at the home, and we don't want to worry about having, permanent pets there. Really good. It's a good parallel conversation and presentation to this idea of planning for your pets long-term. When you don't want a long-term plan for your pets, a short-term fostering situation is often a really good alternative. So I think that's all the questions, unless I missed one, and Allison or John can jump in and tell me.
I don't think you did. I think you handled that very, very well, Anna. And thank you for a very informative presentation. Again, keep in mind that a copy of the video will be sent to you sometime later today for your records or for use elsewhere. So thank you very much for attending. Again, keep in mind that these AARP webinars are designed to help you live a better and more and fuller life. So thank you and have a great holiday weekend. Thank you,
everyone. And make sure that you're careful about Thanksgiving time, turkey bones and all of the things that can be toxic to pets. So just make sure you keep an eye on those pets, and especially those kitties that can jump up on counters and get into things. So have a really wonderful Thanksgiving, and thank you all for your attendance today and for thinking about your pets. This is really, it's a really special thing to see.
Goodbye now.